Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Gathering Place. I'm Tom Ray, and it's so good to have you here today to join us as we dive into a very sensitive topic. It can be sensitive to some, especially, but we encourage you to reach out and touch someone. Amen. To tell them about what we're doing here and invite them to be a part of it. We'd like to hear from you too. Your comments during the show or perhaps suggestions for future shows. But we thank you once again for joining us. So I'd like to introduce to you our crew. We have Ben and Talora Bookie, and we have the famous Ken Shelton here to my left, your right. And thank you guys for showing up today. And let's dive in. Ben, you want to tell us what we're talking about?
So if you didn't watch last week, stop this, go back and watch last week. Okay, maybe not. You don't have to. But we were talking about forgiveness last week. It's kind of what it is, and but we're going to continue that conversation because there's a lot to talk about with forgiveness, and we could probably talk about this every week and never exhaust this topic because it's such an important thing. And you know, as believers, even like people don't agree on how to forgive, what forgiveness means, what it looks like. There's if you go to a Christian bookstore, if you still have one in your community, there's like a huge shelf just full of books about forgiveness. And so we're going to tackle some of that, but really just kind of we forgive and then what? Like what happens? Is there something that follows forgiveness? If I forgive, do I have to reconcile? Do I have to have a relationship with this person? Do I have to forgive and forget? Do I have to, forgive and, fill in the blank. If you have questions about forgiveness, hop on the chat, let us know. We'll see them. We'll answer those. And so I don't know if anybody wants to kick it off and really talk about that, but
well, I have a story that I thought about. It's a story I heard. I learned a long time ago and shared this. So there was these two brothers, and they owned a hardware store, and um, one of them set a $5 bill on the register and went back in the back. And while he was in the back, someone came in and stole the $5. Well, the brother came out. I'm sorry, the man came back out and he said, where's the $5? And he accused his brother of stealing the $5. And then the brother was lying about it. So he thought. It got to a point where he was so angry, he ended up, they ended up putting a wall down the middle of the hardware store and creating two hardware stores. For 30 years, they didn't talk to each other. Then one day, a man walked in through the door and he said, listen, 30 years ago, I came in here and I saw $5 on the register and I took it. And I just want to say I'm sorry and return the $5. So the moral of the story is, and we can look at it and say, wow, over $5 they did that, but an offense is an offense is an offense. When you're offended, you're offended. And sometimes it's something as little as $5 or something where someone has taken a life or something even more drastic than that. So I think there's some categories that we can dive into this evening about the types of offense. For instance, if somebody did steal $5, if they did do it, is it worth throwing a whole relationship over? Or are they habitually stealing $5? That's a different story, and then that requires different boundaries and things of that nature. But anyway, let's toss that around a little bit. Ken?
My father told me a story just before he passed away a few years ago, and it was about one of his uncles, a great uncle of mine that I'm sure I never met. My grandmother's brother. And my dad said that his name came up somehow. My dad looked at me and goes, he was really a troublemaker. And I said, oh, yeah, he caused a lot of trouble, huh? What did he do? And he said, well, he like he said, if he came over to your house, Ken, he would be talking to you, and he'd find something in your house, little small thing like a knickknack, or something that was important but not extremely expensive, and put it in his pocket. And then he would go visit your sister and take that thing and put it on her shelf. And he did that. They had like eight kids, and he did that to people, to his nephews and nieces and his kids, and stuff wound up everywhere. And they finally found out that it was him, and he was doing it, and everybody was mad at everybody because this one guy was doing it. And I thought of the absurdity of his action, but then I thought of how ready some people are to be offended. There are some people who carry their feelings on their sleeve, as we always say, and they're just easily offended. I'm not sure what makes that happen. I've noticed it in church quite a bit. Um, and especially in small to mid-sized churches, there seem to be some people who just they're ready to be offended. They're going to be offended if you sat in their chair. If I remember shortly after we started the church in Brighton, we had two couples of the group that came, two elderly couples. Uh, they were both from the South somewhere, and one had a job, but the other one was retired. And the fellow that was retired got up and left his seat and went to the bathroom. And the other fellow came in after having stepped out or whatever and sat down in his seat. And he came out of the bathroom and he saw that guy in his seat. These were friends, man. These were tight friends. He saw his friend in his seat. And I know this sounds horrible, but he looked at me, he looked at the situation, and he just turned around and walked out of the church and walked home. And I called him after church and I said, Roy, I said, I saw you left. What happened? He said, see, he didn't have a car. He didn't have a license. But the other guy, the guy that took his seat, had the car and the license. And he said, some people with their fancy cars and their fancy clothes just come on in and take whatever is there, and it's not theirs to take. And he took my seat, and I said, that's enough of that. I'm not coming back. And I thought, well, thank God, there's a miracle in everything.
It's a good story because it actually ties right into the point I wanted to make, is that so often those people who want to be offended, it's tied into something in the past.
Yes.
Right. And, I wonder if often for those people, if being offended has become their coping mechanism, their defense mechanism, really, they think, keep themselves safe so people can't hurt me again. Although all it does is, of course, the exact opposite, because it does not allow for a relationship to actually occur, and it keeps you isolated, and which then they get offended about that.
That's a good perspective.
I think too that people create rules, and so that'll never happen to me again. If that person says that they won't treat me like that, and you start creating these rules that this isn't going to happen to me never again. This, I'm not going to tolerate that ever again. And then when you start creating those rules, it also opens up the door for you to be offended, because it's never going to happen again. And maybe it was a misinterpretation. Maybe it's the way you perceived it. We have these cognitive distortions that we talk about in I think it's cognitive behavioral therapy, right, Ben? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I didn't
Me
do
too.
well on my grade, on my grades. But anyway, so in that in the cognitive distortions, it's how we intake information and then how we see it. So if you've been hurt by someone, you intake that information and then it's going to filter through that and that's all you see. Like maybe it's catastrophizing, or maybe it's mind, what they call mind reading, which is trying to guess what somebody's saying or what they meant by something. And honestly, we don't know. But when I talk to Ben says, I said, well, what do you think about this? And he'll say, well, I don't know, I'm not a mind reader. And I say, well, I am. So let's talk about this. Let's so he just always is trying to like use like all this psychic or psycho, not psycho, psycho mumbo jumbo on me. So, but that's what I really believe, is that it is how it becomes filtered through us. And so then those rules are so that we can start protecting ourselves, which offense, I'm not going to go to church where blah 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 happens. If you can't take your coffee in the sanctuary, then I'm not going.
That is important, though.
Yeah, it is, yes, it's very important. I'll tell you what, though, for the first 2 years when we started the church, people were getting offended about anything, everything. It was the craziest thing. And here's the common denominator, and I hate to say this, I'm an old person, but it was all old people. They were all getting offended. One lady got offended because, we were going to buy chairs for the children's ministry, and mentioned that we took an offering and we bought chairs, and this lady just got offended, man. She got offended, and you ask them why, and they won't tell you. Oh, I'm not playing that game. You either tell me or just don't tell me. I don't care, whatever. But she finally coughed it up. She said, "They weren't red." I said, "Right, we didn't get little red chairs." "Right, but I gave in that offering, and when I was a little girl, I went to church and we had little red chairs. You didn't get little red chairs."
Mm-hmm.
We didn't say anything about red chairs, but she believed in red chairs. I had a lady walk up to me in a service. This was some years later. I don't know why I'm bringing this up. She walked, church is over. She was from my parents' home state of Kentucky, and she was a little old lady, and she was different. And I don't mean like if you're from Kentucky you're different, because I love my Kentucky family. But she walked up to me one day. I was standing on the platform. She came up there. She stood. She said, "Do I like your preaching? No, I do not. Do I like your songs? No, I do not. But when I come to this church, I see protons and neutrons in the air everywhere, and I think I'm going back."
Well, there you go. How could you be mad at that?
She was honest with you, Ken.
Sure, I walked away, and I just thought, I love this stuff, man. This is so good. You can't make it up. I'm just coming.
Hey,
I protons and no, I do not.
Hey, I think pastors have a special place in heaven.
That's Kevin.
Because we hear a lot of stuff, and Kevin, yes, says I love you. Hey, we love you too, brother.
Yeah. Hey, man.
Jump on and say hello sometime.
Yeah.
But wow, that is some stuff that happens.
Stop watching while you're driving, Kevin.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes on the road.
So I have had some people come up on the stage after service was over, steam basically coming out of their ears, saying that I played the music played the music too so loud it hurt their ears, and they were offended that I did that. and yeah,
I was going to talk to you about that.
yeah. Thank you. Intervention, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So
That's what tonight was about, really.
yeah,
It's all set
it's a
up.
trap. It's a trap.
Yeah.
So,
But you
yeah.
better forgive.
Yeah.
Huh?
You better forgive them for it.
Oh yeah. I did. With each decibel.
The Bible talks about familiar spirits. And sometimes I have wondered if and I think it's okay to think that this is the case. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. But I think familiar spirits being what they are, spirits that are familiar or that run in families or that people are accustomed to, sometimes you just wonder if it's not some kind of spiritual activity. I'm not talking about a demon. I'm not talking about the devil. I'm just talking about a prevailing atmosphere in a person or in a family that's almost like a character trait. Or
I also think, oh, I'm sorry.
no, or the hair color, eye color.
Well,
Nobody in that family forgives anybody.
Well, one of the things I came to terms with a few years back is that I will get, I don't know if the right word's aggravated, or it's the same type of personality. And that reminds me of my past abusers. And so then it's the thing that keeps coming over and over again, and I think that's what you're saying is all of a sudden they have the same, they're doing, saying the same things. They're doing this, they're doing that. And what if it is not necessarily, I don't know. I don't want to say it's not spiritual, but what if it is a weapon that's used, to distract us?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I get focused right on it. I'll be like,
Well, it can definitely be a stronghold
yeah,
in a person's life. There are many strongholds. We don't have to personify a thing, and say that it's a demon or it's a devil.
Yeah.
We don't have to do that in order to understand that it's spiritual in nature.
Mhm.
When things are spiritual in nature, it's just that they originate from a corrupt origin. And bingo, there it is. It's going to be felt.
Yeah.
I think that can be the case.
I agree.
I've spoken with couples who have this is their second or even third relationship, and they've brought baggage from the last relationship, wounds that haven't been healed from the past relationship, and people they haven't forgiven, and so in the new relationship, if someone does something that reminds them of that other person, then look out, right? And that person is getting the full force that the other person deserves, right? Or whatever however you want to look at that. And so there's got to be healing in order for people to move forward, or they stay tethered to that moment in the past, and or they begin to corrupt, if maybe that's too strong a word, but corrupt this current relationship. Unforgiveness affects all relationships in your life, because you draw boundaries. I think, like you said earlier, to Laura, you create these boundaries that are not to be towards everyone, and so there is we can use boundaries, but boundaries aren't for everybody. Everybody doesn't need boundaries because everybody's not going to be an offender.
Right.
But we do that, right, to protect ourselves, and it hurts other relationships that could be very fruitful in our life. But we've drawn a line in the sand and said, like you said to Laura, I will not be treated like that again. And so the first sign of that, they think, that's that person trying to get back. That's the enemy trying to get back at me again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yeah,
I think sometimes we try to fit into a group that we don't belong in.
Mm.
Uh, Idealistically, I think we like to imagine that anybody could fit anywhere in any group, but that's just not logical. There are groups of people that are like a closed society, and it's that way on purpose. They have a commonality that they share. They exist for a reason, right? Say you hire onto a new job and everybody else has been there a long time and you're brand new, and you just can't get in. My brother-in-law was a psychologist and a mental health worker in northern Michigan, and he was up in Iron County, and he had been there 30 years. He told me that I've been here so long as the director of the mental health facilities, and there are still people that I know in this town that don't trust me because I'm not from here.
Mm.
And the same thing happens. I brought up Southern situations, and again, I'm not picking on any, I'm full-blooded hillbilly myself, but um, my, I forget who it was. Oh, it was that same brother-in-law. He called it hillbilly logic. That people do things that backfire, but it's not a regional thing. It's just the way it is. You can be in a setting and then others could try to fit in. And I think that happens in church. I think that when a person begins coming to church or has been in a church and maybe they don't socialize real easily for some reason, and they try to fit into a group and it's just not working for them. And then they get all ticked off because everybody's rejecting them. And I think that that's a very real problem. People feel that. And
Mhm.
yeah, if you were going to a church and you couldn't fit in anywhere, yeah, you'd be offended. I wouldn't blame you for being offended, but what do you do about it? You know, they won't let me in the group, Mom. Where do you go?
40
Start,
years old, Mom. No.
start your own group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everett
Start your own-
Worthington has a book, Forgiving and Reconciling, and one of the things he talks about is, this is just his model to understand how we get to unforgiveness, and it might be useful in this discussion. So he talks about, there's a transgressions. Somebody does something, and but the next part is important because it's our perception of it that really determines that offense and that hurt. And then out of that offense and hurt, if we go to those hot emotions like anger, fear, and then we start to ruminate on it, right? Like we're just thinking and thinking and thinking and replaying that over and over. That's what leads us to unforgiveness. And I think there's so much truth in that. It's like, how I perceive that and how I think about it and how I allow myself to continue to think about it or not really determines where I end up with it. And we talked about earlier, those people who are just always offended about something, well, because they're looking for something, right? Because things maybe feel so unsafe to them or they're so fearful. And when they allow that to happen, like, of course they're going to perceive everything through that lens. We all have this way we see things based on our past experiences. And so whether it's in your marriage or your church family or your work environment, right? Well, yeah, if I get in there and I think I'm not going to fit in, right, I already set the groundwork for offense.
That's right.
And then I start to ruminate on that, and then I'm mad at all of them and not forgiving them, and wherever that ends up going, depends on our personality. And so
I
and so
think
I think that like because we're talking about that person who's always offended in the church. I mean, I think we've made it pretty clear, but not explicitly stated. Those people are everywhere, right? But
Right.
because
We just have that in common. So
we're focused on, because we're all in the church working. But and if you don't have one of those people in your group, maybe you need to look at yourself and see if you're that person, right? But they do tend to show up, right?
What's the problem? Me. Yeah. Look in the mirror, me.
I offend myself.
Yeah.
So figuring that out though, and okay, what if I am that person that's offended about everything? Like, what do I do about that? How do I stop that behavior?
Well, I think I want to go back on something you were saying too. I think that the people, when they come in offended, I know, like for myself, I've shared my past abuses, is that you begin to justice seek too. So then it puts a different spin on things as well. And I don't know why I thought about that when you were talking about it, but I did.
No, but I do want to come back to that.
Yeah, because you begin to justice seek. And so then what happens? You have to seek justice, right? That whole offense, and these people are treating you bad. Well, justice needs to be sought. And that's a hard. I mean, sometimes there are times where, justice needs to be sought. There are, where, like, if you've been abused, if you've been harmed, you can't allow people to continue to do those things to you. But justice seeking, just because, you get offended about, like, coffee, I'll go back to the coffee in the sanctuary, that's, you don't need to seek justice for that. Just find another church or drink your coffee in the lobby.
Well, there's a certain there's a certain point that being offended is logical. There was a man, a pastor, who got mad at me for things. I'm not sure what his real reason was for being mad at me. And he told me off in front of a group of other pastors. He ripped me up, man. I mean, and I, what are you doing? He said, I want to hurt you. Don't you understand? I want to hurt you. I'd never done anything to that guy. And it was humiliating. And what was also humiliating is I had some friends standing there watching that go down, and they didn't do anything. And I've never seen myself as a person who was easily offended. But boy, I'll tell you what, that hurt. That really hurt me. And it took me a while to get over that. And it would pop up, and I would pray about it. Finally, I called him and I said, listen, I don't know what it was I did that set you off, but, I'd like to clear the air. He said, you didn't do anything. Made no sense, right? But it can be very logical to be offended. You can be hurt. And it's okay. If somebody has hurt you, it's okay to say you hurt me if it's a genuine hurt. But if it becomes your life's pattern, where this is happening over and over and over in every group that you belong to, it's your situation you're going to have to grow out of, right? Mm-hmm. And forgiveness for me in that situation involved having to pray about it every time that it came up to my mind, because I always think of things that I should have said, like I should say, is it just me, or are you that way to everybody?
I think we have that tendency, and I think it's always helpful to remember those things that I think of afterward that I should have said. Probably I shouldn't have said anyway.
Never, no, never should have said it.
But knowing, like, in that same book I was talking about earlier by Everett Worthington, he talks about the difference between decisional forgiveness and emotional forgiveness. And decisional forgiveness is, when Jesus says, forgive your brother 70 times 7, that's choosing to forgive. but that doesn't take away the wounds.
Right.
Right. And that's where that emotional forgiveness, and that's the one I think that, I choose to forgive, and those wounds are going to keep bringing that up until they're healed. And so recognizing, like, that's why we talked last week, like, about this being a process, right? Like, and yeah, like, we might have to keep going back to, like, that decisional forgiveness, because we haven't achieved that emotional forgiveness yet, because we are still wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in that process, even recognizing that, like Tora was talking about justice, like, God is very concerned about justice. And sometimes, like, we do get to see that justice is done, but not always. But we don't get to do vengeance. We don't get to get revenge. Like, God reserved that for himself, but he is very concerned about justice, and that we do justice, that we do what's just. So, I think that recognizing those are different things in this. Like, forgiveness is its own thing, right? And sometimes we mistake that need for justice as being unforgiving. And really, it's just, no, I'm waiting for justice.
Yeah.
When my, we told the story last week quite a bit about my sister being killed and all that. And whenever this information would another news footage or whatever would go out online or social media, I think it's MLive, right? MLive does their media posts on Facebook and things like that, and there would be one person after another doing this justice seeking, as you were saying, in that what's called a third party offense, right? They're offended for the other person, and so now they have this judgment against this person. In this case, it was Ronnie. He was the guy that killed my sister, and so they speculate all these things about him, framing this picture. And when my family chose to forgive, there were people offended at us because we chose to forgive him. It was the craziest thing, but we see it in society, right? We see it in, like, certain movies that we watch, and we see this guy come in and do such damage to somebody's life or somebody's family, and we're like, get him, and so we have this about us that we want justice. We want to see them get their comeuppance,
Yeah.
and it's a shame a lot of times that we get into that, especially when it didn't happen to us. And I know that there's some of us, that's why there's vigilantes, right? The whole Batman character was created, was because you know what, the law is not able to do nothing here or do anything here, so I'm going to do something about this. And so I think it's interwoven into our lives. So man, that can be an exhausting adventure for sure, to go around and seek justice for everybody. But there is people that do need a voice, someone that does need to stand up and help defend and all of that. But it's when it gets into spewing and hatred towards a person that never offended you, that's where it becomes a problem. And you know what? A lot of times we see it all the time around the political figures, right? Around the nominations of who's going to be a president or whatever, and these people are angry, and you say, "Why are you angry?" And they can't give you an answer. They're just angry because everybody else is angry. And it's like, look, you got a life to live. Go on with it. There's other things more important than this. And so that's the way
you just offended me, Tom. Stop that.
See? Told you. Hey, so I want to tell you one quick thing. So there was a funeral that I conducted years ago, and this man had offended everybody. Like, I'm not sure there's anybody he didn't offend. He did something to them, stole something, cheated them, whatever the case may be, and they were bitter. All these people, it was the most challenging funeral I'd ever done. And so they were carrying this bitterness. But what's worse is because they couldn't make things right. This was a family member that they couldn't make things right with. They couldn't say, I forgive you. So now they knew that he died, and they still have this resentment toward him.
Mm.
And that was so difficult. So the Lord inspired me to, or prompted me to stand in for this man, to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And it came from that perspective of, you know, some people will not get healing until they hear someone else say, I'm sorry.
It's good.
And so I stood in for him and was his proxy, so to speak, and just said, I'm sorry. And it helped a lot of people that day to come to terms with this bitterness that they were carrying about this deceased person. And wow, that was challenging. But a lot of people walked away from that feeling better. But there was a person that walked away from that even more offended, now offended at my wife and I, because we had decided to forgive. And so that's how the enemy does a lot of times in people's lives. He just tries to find fault in people, or chooses to hold on to unforgiveness, and nothing you say or nothing you do is going to sway me from forgiving that person. And because you forgive that person, I won't forgive you. So, oh my goodness, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was very challenging. To Laura?
There's a counseling technique called the empty chair, and that's kind of what you did, except for you were the person. But it's where that you talk, or you tell the person everything that you're feeling and just wanting to get it all out, and you just imagine you're talking to them. I often tell people, nowadays nobody knows if you're really talking to someone on the phone or not. I said, you could have a whole conversation going down the highway and just trying to get those things out. Journaling, that was another piece.
Don't journal and drive. No, don't do that.
Like Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, don't be journaling and driving. It's illegal.
You're right.
But it's, I always say, well, it's like Shrek, right? Better out than in, but he's not talking about, feelings and stuff. But I always believe that you have to have some way to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will advocate, right? Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, where that they would participate in different, I think it was like activities, right? I can't remember because I know it was like in the 80s or 90s, but it gives you something to focus on. Domestic violence. As soon as I was out of the relationships I had been in, I started working or volunteering in domestic violence shelters, because you have to have something. You have to have something to focus on, a purpose with it. Like you even talking about your sister, Tom, that's and what happened, that right there, first of all, you're getting it out, but also you have a purpose with it too, so that you could see others healed.
Yeah. I want to share one thing that popped up in my mind here that I've not thought about. And that is, so she was killed by the man who was huffing all night. He was doing drugs, basically. And so when I talked to someone and they said, yeah, I was out last night, I had a few beers, and I got on the road, started driving and stuff, and that makes me really upset, because I know how that affected our family. And so I have to pray that that I don't do that. There was I did a stint of ride sharing, And there was a guy that got in my car and he was huffing in my car.
Wow.
He had a big CO2 canister and just hitting that thing. I'm like, what are you doing? And there's people that just, of course, he was riding, right? But
Mhm.
I was having a problem, especially in my car. What in the heck are you doing in here?
Yeah.
But there, that is a part, if you want to call justice seeking, I'm like, why would you do that? Because you're impaired and you shouldn't be on the road because you might hurt someone, like
Right.
my sister was hurt. So,
Mm.
and the gentleman that did this, Ronnie, he regrets that he did it, but it still happened. And had he not put himself in that situation, that wouldn't have happened. So, yeah, that's something that pops up occasionally when someone shares that they were tying one on, so to speak, and still driving or still operating something that could harm other people. So, wow, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we move on to that next point there, Ben? When you talked about forgive and then what should be the then?
I don't know if there's like a should be, because so much of it I think depends on the other person and the history maybe associated with it, because sometimes, right, the person repents, right? They do an about face, like they change their behavior. They apologize and there's change, right? And they repair this relationship, right? So the then might be reconciliation. Like, I'm allowing you back into my life. It doesn't, trust is a little different than reconciliation, right? Because we can reconcile and have a relationship. The trust may not be back, but that takes time and consistency from the other person. But if this is a person like that's, we've been talking about abuse, and Wendy had commented about abuse on here too. If this is a person who's been abusing you, right? You might forgive that person for that, and biblically you should. That doesn't mean there's going to be a reconciliation.
Right.
That would be poor discernment on your part, and we're told to be wise and to be discerning. And why would you go back to that person who had been abusing you and allow them to still abuse you? Jesus didn't do that, right? He's like, nope, we're not. You would just disappear, right? Like from the crowd, right? And so it might be like forgiveness and discernment then, right? So it might be forgiveness and reconciliation. It might be forgiveness and discernment. And discernment looks like boundaries, which your boundaries might be like, well, I'll see you, at this location when I have to, but, or it might be like, we're not having any contact any longer.
That's good. Yeah. I think it's also possible that we don't forgive fully because we don't recall fully. I remember a very important book that I read on forgiveness by Father Patrick Brennan, and he said that we can only forgive to the extent that we remember.
Mm-hmm.
And we remember what we, in certain painful situations, what we allow ourselves to remember. And we can forgive that. And then what? Well, then if we clear that slate, you're going to remember something else connected to that. You're going to remember a little deeper. And you may have to forgive and forgive and forgive before you're at a place where you've cleared that out of your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that, Ken, because there was, I was jumped when I was 16. And so years later, it wasn't just the guys that I was angry at that I had to forgive, the guys that jumped me. And I remember the woman that had witnessed my beatdown And I was the one that called the police, not her. So I was offended at her. And then I was offended because the police didn't do anything. At least so I thought in that moment, but I still had to go back and process this. You know, I had unforgiveness towards the police. They don't even know it. But you know, it's something that was very interesting. So I was jumped by 5 or 6 black people, and they, you know, I didn't have a problem with racism. I had black friends and all of that. But when that happened, racism, I think, I don't know what other way to categorize it, came into my heart. And it wasn't until I saw Rodney King getting beat down on national television that I realized that it could happen to anybody. And the Holy Spirit spoke to me in that moment, said, it's not the color of a man's skin, but the spirit that drives him. And so I repented in front of the television. And then I started thinking back. And it was interesting that the next day, after I got beat down, I went to the police to get justice. And the sergeant wasn't in. He was off on a trip to Hawaii, but there was this black officer, female officer. And I said, what am I supposed to do if I see my bike or whatever? She says, if you see it, take it any way you can. I said, any way you can? And she said, any way you can. I'm like, all right. So we went out and got horseshoe stakes, you know, those pipes that go into the ground, and me and some friends, and we went driving through the city looking for these guys.
Oh my.
Because we had intent in our hearts to take these guys down, you know, for beating me beating me terribly, breaking my nose and everything, left me for dead basically. And so, but I thought back to those moments of these people, these certain circumstances. My brother-in-law, he wasn't my brother-in-law then, but he became my brother-in-law after the fact. And I felt abandoned because he left me, but he was running away so that he wouldn't get picked off, number one. But number two, he went to go and get help. But the help that he went to get didn't want to help me because I didn't loan money. So there's another person I had to forgive, right? And it just kept. The ogres have layers, so do onions, right? And so the people we have to forgive sometimes because we begin to, you know, pile all this stuff up.
Was this downtown Pontiac?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At CLS. You remember CLS?
CLS.
Literature sales.
Oh yeah. I used to go there all the time. In fact, I think I saw you get beat up, and I didn't do anything. No.
Great, we just added another offense on.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Tom. No.
I forgive you. I forgive you.
You know what? It was the owner of CLS that did that to you. No.
Oh, nice.
Lloyd Miles.
Yeah. We were in the parking lot, riding our bikes around, bunny hopping over the curbs and different stuff. And these guys ran up on us. You know, just hear the patter of feet running up on us. This guy whose fist looked something like this to me at the time of my scrawny 16-year-old self, and he said, "Get off your bike." I'm like, "Here you go," you know. And then he got on my bike and started riding it around. And and then him and his friends started circling me and going, "Ooh," you know, like Indians going around me. And one gentleman got behind me, and another one in front of me. He with a brush, I think he had in his hand, and he hit me with it. I fell over the other guy who was kneeling down behind me, and then they took turns kicking me in my face over and over and over and over and over again. I had Nike printed on my skin. You know, on my shoulder here, and it somehow gotten through my shirt. And the whole while I had been, I had almost drowned before. And so that coming up for air and gasping for air. And I was saying, come on, guys, stop, come on, stop. And because every time I came up to get air, I kept on getting kicked in my face. So you can imagine the trauma that I was experiencing. And then out of nowhere, this blood-curdling scream, high-pitched, never done it before nor since, and it just came out, and then I think I passed out. It'd come to a point where I was just done. And the next thing I remember is just waking up and looking around. Those guys were gone, and there I was in a puddle of blood, and
Mm.
my I was looking for my bike, uh, and so it wasn't there, obviously, but there, I just got myself up and I went over to the house right adjacent to the parking lot there, and said, "Hey, can I use your phone?" And I made a call. And then when the police showed up and EMS, I overheard the woman talking in the house to the left of me. And she said, "Officer, I saw the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
Why am I calling the police?
Yep.
You can gab now, but why didn't you gab then when I was getting my face kicked
Right.
in?" But yeah, man, that was very traumatic for my
I
life.
guess it
And I
was. Yeah.
carried that bitterness for a long time. And then I saw that Rodney King beating and repented, and the Lord started bringing people of a different color into my life, and I'm right at home with them, and just I yes, I'm so blessed, and I thank God that I was able to overcome that, but I carried that for a long time,
Sure. I bet you did.
Yeah.
and it
Wow.
of
Thanks for
course it
sharing that
affected, yeah,
story. That's a
Yeah.
powerful story.
It
yeah.
is too.
So,
It's
and people would say, "You have a right to be angry. Look what they did to you, right? Someone's received police brutality, and so all police are bad." Well, no, those guys are bad, but not all are bad,
yeah.
right? Well, that pastor did something to me, so all churches are bad. All pastors are bad. No, not all churches and not all pastors are bad. Um, and so, but a lot of times people will use that expression, for church hurt, and it keeps them from going to church.
Yeah.
Look, find a different church, but
Yep.
people are people are people are people, and they're going to offend. Jesus told us in his word, look, get ready, folks. People are
Um,
going to offend you.
yeah.
Even the people that you think that most likely will never hurt you, they hurt you. And it's not because they're seeking to hurt you necessarily, but they will offend you somehow because we're people, right? That's what we do. I do my best to live my life in a way that I don't offend anybody, but somehow, some way, I end up offending somebody, just like you can,
Yeah.
someone come up to you and telling
Somebody,
you and schooling you in front of all your friends.
I
Yeah.
forget who it was that years ago we were talking about offense, and I don't remember who that was, where that was, but I remember the lesson that came out of it. We were discussing how not to be offended.
Yeah.
Um, of course, it's not logical to think that there are never going to be situations that are going to be offensive to you. There will be some things that will offend you. But when it comes to the more tame situations, not what you experienced, Tom, that was a
Yeah.
uh,
It's not.
trauma that you experience. And I mean, I was just trying to imagine it as you were describing it. And I felt so badly that you had to endure that. But when it comes to relationships and church, when it comes to family, um, this person said, well, you just have to hold your own center of gravity.
Mm.
And I thought about that. And I did some research on it, and I found that phrase in more places than one. And the concept basically is, if you had to carry a big stone, a heavy stone, with your hands out in front of you, there's no way you could do that very easily because it would only be your shoulders, your chest, your arms that would allow you to hold it. But if you bring it into you and you hold it, you can walk with that stone up to a certain point. And holding your own center of gravity is like that, in that um, we're not looking for the weight of approval and acceptance from other people all the time, but we approve of ourselves and we accept ourselves. And if nobody else does, I'm gonna be all right. I want you to like me. I really do. But if you don't, I'm gonna be all right because I hold my own center of gravity. And that has served me really well and has helped me through some difficult situations just to like myself a little bit better
Mm.
and to be at peace. Did that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think even as a Christian, when we think about that, like carrying that heavy rock, right? I mean, we've talked on here before, right? Like we can give that to Jesus, right? He'll carry that for us. We can take on His burden, but I think for the sake of this, it's that along with forgiveness, we also need lament. We need that time to grieve.
Mm,
And sometimes we forget about that in this process
point.
too.
Yeah.
And when you think about carrying that heavy rock, I mean, think about that as like this is me lamenting, and it could be. I mean, we could lament a lot of things in situations. I mean, it could be because we know it's the end of a relationship, or because we know it was a wound. Maybe we caused the wound, but maybe it was a wound caused to us. Maybe it was just lamenting the our sin fallen world. I mean, that's a thing we should lament. um so there's a lot of things that we could lament and go through that process. And um and because then like Ken, you're saying, you can only carry that, you can only do this for so long, right? And really carry that, right? At some point we get to give that up, or we can. And if we don't, what's going to happen? Physically, we're going to crumble.
That's right.
Because we can't keep carrying it forever. And so, but we also, need to go through the steps and through the process and actually do the things intentionally. And, and so like when we're especially thinking about that emotional forgiveness, like
Yes.
we can decide to forgive and do the
Choice.
decisional. And then we need to add in this emotional forgiveness. Let me do the things for the emotional forgiveness.
As you're saying that, scripture came to mind, Ben, and it's found in Luke 17:1. And I'm reading this from the New King James Version. Then he said to his disciples, "It is impossible that no offenses should come. But woe to him through whom they do come." In other words, it's very important to God. There's another place that said it's impossible that offenses do not come, but blessed is he who's not offended in me. Let's not hold that offense against the Lord.
Right.
But it helps to know that when we are truly offended, that we can give that over to the Lord, and the Lord will take care of it. But I think some people feel like when they give it over to the Lord, they're letting go of the possibility of retribution or of justice. I see justice as making everything right.
Mm-hmm.
All things made right. And of course, we don't know the scale that measures that. I don't know how to make all things right. I know how I might make this one thing right, but I may make 10 things wrong by making that one right.
Yeah.
But if I leave it alone and give it to God, the Lord will bring justice about. And the correction, the justice, the discipline, whatever's involved will be right because the Lord knows.
Yes.
And we stay out of it. And I see it, justice, judgment, and vengeance are really closely interwoven. They're not all the same thing, but they're close. They're a lot alike. Revenge, as you said, Ben, is it's vindictive. You don't really care about making it right. You just want to get back, You don't care that that guy says he's sorry for what he did. You just want to beat him down, Tom, like he beat you down. That's vengeance.
That's
And we're told right there in Scripture, don't seek vengeance. It's mine. Don't take it away from me.
Mhm.
You think about that. And think about what Paul said about it. He said, don't seek vengeance. He said, because leave that for the Lord, because the Lord knows how to avenge.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. God knows how to take care of those situations.
Yep.
And now don't sit around and imagine the Lord coming downtown with horseshoe spikes and going downtown Pontiac and finding those guys and beating the daylights out of them, you know. I see you, Jesus. What? You know.
Yeah, that's so powerful. You said that, and it's true. We look for that. We want the Lord to cast this on people, but the Bible says back in the day it was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but then the story changed, and he said, "Pray for those who despitefully use you and say all manner, do all manner of evil against you." And it goes on and on. I believe it's in Matthew. But it begins to talk about all those things, to pray for my enemies, to bless them. I mean, that is just crazy to think about.
Well, you know
But-
why he said that, though, don't you, Tom? Because there
Yeah, come
were
on.
most of the nation were going around with one eye. Sorry.
One eye in 1 ear.
Everybody was mad at everybody.
Yeah.
He had to tell them, stop doing that, because you all just like a one-eyed tribe. Stop it, you know.
I do have some books. I want to share a few books.
Share it,
These are
hurry.
more. This is more for.
I hope I didn't offend anybody. And if I
No, you didn't offend us, not us. But this is Raised to Stay. It's her devotional. She actually has written 3 books. The first one's called Raised to Stay. This is about church hurt and how she basically how God
Who's that
healed.
by?
Huh?
Who is it by?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's by Natalie Runyon, Runion. And then this is Intimate Deception, and it's Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal. There's a lot of people out there that are hurting because their spouse has had an affair. It's by Dr. Sherry Keffer. Is that how you pronounce it, Ben? And she has some chapters in it about healing. I got more. Not Forsaken. This is a story of life after abuse. And this also has, can you see it? You can't see it very well. Whoops. There you go. This also has, she has some chapters about healing. And one of her abusers was her father.
Who is that one by?
That one's by Jennifer Elm Greenberg. And then this one, of course, Lisa Turkers. There we go. I Want to Trust You, but I don't. And there was another one that it's not supposed to be this way. I think it's another one that she has. I don't have that one here. That's at one of our offices. But she also talks about, just what she went through and her healing towards God after what happened in her life. So I just wanted to share those with everyone because we all want to heal. We don't want to carry negativity, because if you become negative, then you'll be like that lady that went up to Ken and say,
No, I do not.
And nobody wants to be the story on the broadcast. Okay.
Nice.
Right.
Nice.
But as I always remind people, if you do something to me, eventually you're going to be a story I tell at a conference or here or in a counseling session.
Yeah.
Nice. Love it. Well, I think we've come to the end.
To protect,
Yeah, I think we've
not
come.
really the innocent, but to protect them, whoever they are.
We've come to the end of our time together, and we thank you all for joining us. How can people get in touch with you? Let's say folks are dealing with the challenge of trying to forgive, right? They've read all the books, they know they're supposed to forgive, but they need to process that. And or maybe they're dealing with the trauma from back in the day, and it's just compounded. Ben and Talora, you are both into counseling and all of that kind of stuff. How can people get in touch with you?
So just go over to our website, quiescounseling.com. Our email is there, our phone number is there, fax, our Facebook is there. So you can read a little bit about it if you really want to. So.
All right. If Ken, if people want to get in touch with you to tell you about your singing or your preaching,
KenSheltonInfo@gmail.com. Don't shake your head at me. That's it.
And you can reach out to me at Pastor Tom Ray at Gmail, and we'll be glad to return a message to you. We want to hear from you if you're dealing with something, need prayer, or you have some ideas for a future show here on the Connection Point. Excuse me, this is not the Connection Point. That's my
that was a plug for his church.
That's the gathering.
By the way, if you
place.
want a good church to go to Tom's church. Tom and his wife are two great people. So
thank you, Talora. I'll pay you after we get off of the air.
Yeah, and I'll even drop you can have coffee in the sanctuary. I'll just leave that little bit there.
All right. Just drop it, right? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today on The Gathering Place. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. And please share this with other people and know that Jesus forgave you. Go and do life.